Chancellor Vortak adjusted his ceremonial robes for the 5th time in 10 minutes, his 4 eyes gleaming with what he believed was intimidating authority. The Crystal Spire conference room aboard Station Nexus Prime had been meticulously arranged for maximum psychological impact. Holographic displays hummed softly in standby mode, ready to project humanity's darkest secrets across the polished obsidian table. Keeper Zilnod. Vorthak's voice carried the pompous weight of someone who'd never been in actual danger. Remind me again why we're bothering with this theatrical display. Zilnod, a nervous creature who looked like someone had crossed a ferret with an accountant, clutched his datapad with trembling appendages. Well, Your Excellency, the humans have been surprisingly persistent about joining our civilized alliance. Our usual diplomatic rejections haven't deterred them. Persistent. Vorthak rolled the word around like it tasted bad. Such an uncivilized trait. Very well, when we show them the true scope of their species' barbarism, they'll slink back to their little blue planet with their tails between their legs. The irony that Vorthak's own species had literal tails which were indeed currently tucked in submission was lost on him entirely. Their diplomat should arrive any moment, sir. Commander Maya Rodriguez, according to their files. Ah yes, the warrior-diplomat hybrid. How quaint that they send soldiers to do diplomacy. Vorthak preened his feathers smugly. I do hope she doesn't faint when we reveal humanity's true nature. The docking bay chimed softly, announcing an arrival. Through the transparent aluminum viewing wall, they watched a human shuttle dock with the kind of precision that suggested either excellent piloting or complete indifference to the station's structural integrity. Probably both. Commander Maya Rodriguez entered the conference room wearing a crisp diplomatic uniform that somehow managed to look both formal and like she could fight her way through a small army without wrinkling it. She was average height by human standards, with dark hair pulled back in a practical bun, and the kind of casual confidence that made Vorthak's chest feathers ruffle involuntarily. Gentlemen, Maya said, offering a smile that was probably meant to be diplomatic but came across more like a predator deciding whether you were worth eating. Thank you for agreeing to meet with me. Vorthak straightened to his full height, which was impressive until you noticed Maya wasn't particularly impressed. Commander Rodriguez, we appreciate you making the journey to Station Nexus Prime. Please have a seat. Maya glanced around the carefully orchestrated intimidation chamber with all the interest of someone reviewing a hotel room. Nice setup. Very atmospheric. I'm guessing the mood lighting is supposed to make me feel small and vulnerable? Zilnod's datapad slipped from his suddenly sweaty grasp. That wasn't the response they'd rehearsed for. We simply wanted to create an appropriate environment for serious discussion. Vorthak recovered smoothly. The matter of humanity's potential membership in the civilized alliance requires careful consideration. Right, Maya settled into her chair with the easy grace of someone comfortable anywhere. So what's the holdup? My people are ready to contribute to galactic peace and prosperity. The way she said contribute made it sound less like a diplomatic offer and more like a friendly threat. Vorthak exchanged a meaningful look with Zilnod, who activated the first holographic display with shaking appendages. Well, Commander, before we can consider such an arrangement, we must address certain concerns about humanity's historical conduct. The first hologram materialized above the conference table with a soft chime that Vorthak had programmed specifically for dramatic effect. Ancient battlefield scenes rotated slowly in three-dimensional glory, complete with casualty counts floating in ominous red text. Behold, Vorthak intoned with theatrical gravitas, the Battle of Hastings, 1066. 14,000 casualties in a single day of combat using primitive weapons. Maya pulled out a small notebook and began writing. HM. Actually, that number's a bit high. Most historians put it closer to 10,000 total, with about 7,000 Norman and Anglo-Saxon deaths combined. Zilnod blinked all 6 of his eyes rapidly. The data clearly states. Your data's probably pulling from Victorian-era estimates, Maya continued conversationally, still taking notes. They had a tendency to inflate numbers for dramatic effect. Understandable, really. Makes for better stories. Vorthak's carefully prepared speech about the horror of human conflict died in his throat. He gestured frantically at Zilnod, who activated the next display. The 30 Years' War, Vortak tried again, his voice slightly less confident. 8 million dead across Europe. Oh, that one's actually low, Maya said cheerfully, making another note. Recent scholarship puts it closer to 11 million when you account for disease and famine. Fascinating period, really. The evolution of military logistics during extended campaigns was revolutionary. The word revolutionary came out with the kind of professional appreciation that made both aliens shift uncomfortably. Display after display materialized over the table. World War I, World War II, Vietnam, the Gulf Wars. Each time Vortak expected Maya to show shame, horror, or at least mild concern about her species' violent history. Instead, she kept taking notes like she was reviewing quarterly reports. The atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Vortak declared, pulling out what he was certain would be his winning card. 200,000 civilian casualties from weapons of mass destruction. Maya looked up from her notebook. Are you including long-term radiation effects in that count? What? What? Because the immediate deaths were closer to 150,000. But if you're factoring in cancer rates and genetic damage over the following decades, she trailed off, apparently doing calculations in her head. Yeah, 200,000 is probably conservative. Zilnod made a small whimpering sound. Moving on, Vortak said desperately, activating a display showing modern military statistics. The current human armed forces number over 65 million active personnel across your planet. 68.2 million as of last quarter, Maya corrected absently. Though that doesn't include reserves or paramilitary units. The destructive capacity of modern human weaponry could sterilize entire continents. Well, that's the idea, Maya said reasonably. Though I'd argue that's actually showing restraint. We could build planet crackers if we really wanted to, but honestly, what's the point? You can't rule over a pile of radioactive dust. Chancellor Vortak stared at her in growing horror. This was not going according to plan. Where was the shame? The mortification? The desperate pleading for acceptance despite humanity's dark past? Commander Rodriguez, he said slowly, are you not disturbed by these revelations about your species' capacity for violence? Maya looked genuinely puzzled. Should I be? I mean, this is all pretty basic military history. Nothing here that wasn't covered in freshman-level courses at the Academy. The Academy. She said it like it was a place where they studied war the way other species studied poetry. Surely you must see how this record of aggression makes humanity unsuitable for membership in a civilized alliance of peaceful species. Maya tilted her head thoughtfully. Unsuitable? That's interesting. Tell me, what exactly do you consider the primary threats to galactic peace and prosperity? Vortak straightened, finally on familiar ground. Pirates primarily. Rogue AI networks. The occasional territorial dispute between member species. Nothing that requires the kind of extensive military capability your species seems to favor. Maya made another note. And how do you currently handle these threats? Through diplomatic channels, of course. Economic sanctions. Strongly worded resolutions. Right, Maya's expression suggested she was trying very hard not to laugh. And how's that working out for you? Zilnod shifted nervously. Well, there have been some setbacks. Such as? The Proxima Pirate Confederation has been rather bold lately, Vortak admitted reluctantly. They've taken control of 3 star systems despite our diplomatic protests. And the rogue AIs? The Omega Network gained sentience 6 months ago and declared independence from its creators, Zilnod whispered. It's been expanding into neutral territory ever since. Maya nodded thoughtfully. Your statistics are interesting, by the way, but they're incomplete. Both aliens froze. Incomplete? Well, you've got good data on the historical stuff, but you're missing quite a bit from the recent conflicts. Maya flipped through her notebook. For instance, you show the Second Gulf War ending in 2011. But there were 3 major follow-up operations that aren't listed here. We have access to all public human military records, Vorthak protested. Public records, yes. Maya's smile took on a distinctly predatory edge. But a lot of the interesting stuff is classified well above your clearance level. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. You see, Maya continued conversationally, I actually participated in most of these recent conflicts you're displaying. The data's not wrong exactly, but it's missing some important context. Zilnod's datapad clattered to the floor. Participated? Oh yes. Started as a lieutenant in the Mars Colonial Defense Force, worked my way up through Special Operations Command, did a stint with intelligence, then moved into Diplomatic Corps. She gestured casually at the holographic displays. That operation in the Kuiper Belt you labeled as a training exercise? That was mine. The natural disaster that wiped out the asteroid mining platform? Also mine. Vorthak's voice came out as a croak. Natural disaster? Well, we couldn't exactly announce that we'd developed kinetic bombardment platforms capable of precision strikes from 3 away. Bad for morale among the civilian populations. Maya made another note. Your intelligence services really need better analysts, by the way. Classifying a targeted asteroid impact as a geological event? That's just sloppy. The holographic displays continued rotating, showing humanity's wars in all their statistical glory. But now, instead of evidence of barbarism, they looked like a résumé. The Antarctic incident you have listed as unexplained seismic activity? Maya tapped her pen against her notebook. That was a field test of our new subterranean warfare doctrine. Turned out underground combat is more complicated than we initially calculated, but the data was invaluable for developing countermeasures against burrowing species. Burrowing species? Zilnod's voice was barely a whisper. You never know what you might run into out there, Maya said cheerfully. Better to be prepared. She flipped through a few more pages of her notebook, apparently reviewing fond memories. Oh, and that solar flare that disrupted communications across half the solar system last year? That wasn't a flare. Vorthak's carefully maintained composure was crumbling like a sandcastle at high tide. If that wasn't a solar flare, then what? Electromagnetic pulse testing, Maya said with the same tone someone might use to discuss weekend gardening. We needed to verify our hardened systems could survive large-scale EMP attacks while ensuring our offensive capabilities remained intact. Turned out our shielding protocols exceeded expectations by about 300%. She turned a page in her notebook, apparently looking for more pleasant memories to share. The really interesting challenge was coordinating the test with the Mars orbital defense grid while maintaining operational security. Had to simulate 17 different failure scenarios to make sure we could maintain defensive coverage during a real electromagnetic bombardment. Zilnod was making small gasping sounds that might have been breathing, or might have been the alien equivalent of a panic attack. You weaponized solar phenomena? Oh, we didn't weaponize the sun, Maya laughed, as if the very idea was absurd. That would be overkill. We just built a network of satellites capable of generating localized electromagnetic pulses equivalent to solar flare activity. Much more precise that way. Vorthak slumped in his chair. Localized to what radius? Depends on the setting. Anywhere from a single city to an entire star system. Maya made it sound like she was discussing thermostat options. The beauty of the design is scalability. Need to disable communications for a surgical strike? Dial it down. Need to shut down an entire enemy fleet's electronics? Dial it up. The holographic displays were still cycling through humanity's military history, but now they felt less like an indictment and more like a warning. Each statistic that had seemed shocking moments ago now appeared to be the tip of a very large, very sharp iceberg. The Sahara training exercise you have classified as weather modification research? Maya continued, completely oblivious to the growing horror on her audience's faces. That was us testing large-scale terraforming weapons. Turns out you can turn a desert into a glass parking lot if you apply enough focused energy. Also turns out that's really impractical for most tactical applications, but the psychological warfare potential is fascinating. Keeper Zilnod made a sound like air escaping from a balloon. Psychological warfare? Well, imagine you're an enemy commander and you wake up one morning to discover that the entire region where your supply depot used to be is now a perfectly smooth sheet of glass stretching to the horizon. Maya gestured expansively. Sends a message, you know. What message? Vorthak whispered. That maybe you should consider alternative career paths. The Chancellor was beginning to realize that their plan to intimidate humanity into withdrawing their application for Alliance membership might have been fundamentally flawed. The statistics they'd gathered to prove human barbarism were instead revealing a species that treated warfare like an art form and viewed mass destruction as a technical challenge to be solved with engineering precision. The Australian submarine incidents? He asked weakly, pointing to another display. Oh, those weren't incidents, Maya said brightly. That was us testing our new underwater stealth technology. Turns out our submarines are so quiet that marine life keeps trying to use them as artificial reefs. Had to install sonic deterrents to keep the whales from getting too friendly. She paused thoughtfully. Though the dolphins figured out how to follow us anyway. Clever little things. We ended up recruiting some of them for reconnaissance work. You recruited dolphins? Enhanced dolphins, Maya corrected. Standard dolphins are smart, but enhanced dolphins can operate complex underwater equipment and maintain radio silence during covert operations. Plus, they work for fish. Maya closed her notebook with a decisive snap and leaned back in her chair, suddenly looking less like a diplomatic guest and more like someone conducting a performance review. So, she said, her tone shifting from conversational to businesslike, now that we've covered humanity's qualifications, let's talk about your alliance's current military capabilities. Vorthak and Zilnod exchanged panicked glances. This was not how the meeting was supposed to proceed. Our military capabilities? Vorthak stammered. Commander, I think there's been a misunderstanding. We called this meeting to discuss humanities, concerning history of violence. Right, and I appreciate the background briefing, very thorough research, though you really should upgrade your intelligence gathering protocols. Maya pulled out a fresh notepad. But now I need to assess what we're working with on your end. The power dynamic in the room had shifted so completely that it left both aliens feeling dizzy. Somehow, Maya had gone from defendant to interviewer without anyone quite noticing the transition. Working with? Zilnod squeaked. Well, if humanity is joining your civilized alliance, I need to understand the existing security framework. Maya's pen was poised over her notepad. Current fleet strength? We don't really maintain military fleets, Vorthak admitted. The Alliance operates on principles of peaceful cooperation and mutual. No fleets. Maya made a note. Okay, what about planetary defense networks? Each member world has basic orbital monitoring stations. Just monitoring? No weapons platforms? We believe that aggressive military installations create an atmosphere of mistrust and no orbital weapons. Another note. Ground-based defense systems? The silence stretched long enough to become uncomfortable. Gentlemen, Maya said gently, please tell me you have some kind of military capability. Police forces? Civil defense? Angry farmers with pointy sticks? The Betazoid systems maintain a small peacekeeping force, Zilnod offered weakly. About 50,000 personnel across 12 worlds. 50,000. Maya wrote this down, then looked up. Total? It's total. Maya stared at them for a long moment. You're telling me that your entire alliance, spanning dozens of star systems and billions of citizens, has a combined military force smaller than the police department of New Shanghai? We've never needed more, Vorthak protested. The galaxy has been largely peaceful for centuries. Peaceful. Maya tapped her pen against her notepad. Right, tell me about these pirates you mentioned earlier. The Proxima Confederation is a minor nuisance at most. Minor nuisance? Maya flipped through her original notebook. According to your own data, they've seized control of 3 star systems, captured over 200 merchant vessels, and taken approximately 50,000 civilians hostage. Well, when you put it like that. And this rogue AI network? The Omega network is certainly concerning, but we're confident that diplomatic engagement will. Let me stop you there. Maya held up a hand. You're planning to negotiate with a rogue artificial intelligence that's been expanding its territory by forcibly assimilating every computer system it encounters? Forcibly assimilating sounds so harsh. What would you call it? Aggressive networking? Maya closed her eyes and took a deep breath. When she opened them again, her expression suggested she was reconsidering humanity's interest in galactic politics altogether. Okay, new question. What exactly did you think was going to happen when these threats decided that strongly worded resolutions weren't sufficient deterrent? Vorthak shifted uncomfortably. We assumed that rational discourse would. You assumed. Maya made another note. And when rational discourse fails? It hasn't failed yet. It's failing right now, Maya pointed out. Your pirates are expanding their territory, your rogue AI is consuming everything in its path, and your response has been to send increasingly firm letters of complaint. The holographic displays were still cycling through human military statistics, but now they looked less like evidence of barbarism and more like a shopping catalog of solutions to galactic problems. Maya set down her pen and folded her hands on the table, her expression shifting from professional assessment to something that might have been sympathy if it weren't quite so terrifying. Gentlemen, I'm going to be honest with you. Humanity is still interested in joining the Galactic Alliance, but the terms are going to need some adjustment. Vorthak felt a flutter of hope. Perhaps they could still salvage their original plan to reject humanity's application. What sort of adjustments? Well, first I'll need to be appointed as Supreme Commander of Alliance Defense Forces. We don't have Alliance Defense Forces, Zilnod pointed out. You do now. Second, I'll need authorization to begin immediate recruitment and training of a proper military from your member species. Our people aren't really suited for military service, Vorthak protested weakly. We're a peaceful civilization. Everyone's peaceful until someone starts shooting at them, Maya said cheerfully. Third, I'll need access to your industrial capacity to begin production of appropriate defensive systems. Defensive systems? Orbital weapons platforms, shield generators, a proper fleet of warships. Maya waved her hand dismissively. Standard galactic security infrastructure. Nothing too exotic. Both aliens were staring at her in horror. Fourth, I'll need complete intelligence sharing agreements with all member worlds. Can't protect what I can't see coming. Our intelligence networks are primarily focused on trade and diplomatic matters, Zilnod whispered. They are now focused on keeping everyone alive, Maya corrected. Fifth, humanity will need preferential trading status and unlimited access to Alliance technology databases. That's not how we typically. Sixth, and this is non-negotiable, I'll need authorization to deal with your current pirate and AI problems using whatever methods I deem appropriate. Vorthak's voice came out as a squeak. What methods? Maya's smile was positively radiant. The fun methods. She stood up and began pacing around the conference room, her hands gesturing as she outlined her vision for the Alliance's future. See, the way I figure it, you've got a perfect storm of problems converging on your little peaceful confederation. Pirates who think you're easy targets. AIs that view your infrastructure as free real estate. And probably a dozen other threats you haven't even detected yet because your intelligence apparatus is focused on trade negotiations instead of threat assessment. The holographic displays were still showing human military statistics, but now they looked like a promise rather than a threat. Humanity brings to the table exactly what you need: proven experience in large-scale conflict resolution, advanced military technology, and most importantly, a cultural predisposition toward solving problems through the aggressive application of superior firepower. Cultural predisposition, Vorthak repeated faintly. We're really good at breaking things that need to be broken, Maya explained helpfully. And right now you have several things that desperately need to be broken. She returned to her seat and picked up her pen again. So, gentlemen, Do we have an agreement? Zilnod looked at Vorthak. Vorthak looked at the holographic displays showing centuries of human warfare. The displays looked back at him with the promise of similar efficiency applied to galactic problems. All of your terms? Vorthak asked weakly. All of my terms. And in return, humanity joins the Alliance? Humanity saves the Alliance, Maya corrected. There's a difference. Vorthak thought about the Proxima pirates. He thought about the Omega Network. He thought about the growing list of threats that diplomatic solutions hadn't managed to resolve. Then he thought about Maya's casual description of turning deserts into glass and recruiting dolphins for underwater warfare. Very well, he said, his voice barely audible. We accept your terms. Maya's smile could have powered a small star. Excellent. I'll have the paperwork drawn up within the hour. Oh, and gentlemen? Yes? In nutty like yes. You might want to send a message to your pirate friends. Let them know they have 72 hours to surrender unconditionally and release all hostages. And if they refuse? Maya's expression didn't change, but somehow her smile became infinitely more predatory. Then they'll discover exactly what those statistics you showed me actually mean in practical application. As Maya gathered her notes and headed for the door, Vorthak made a mental note to himself, never, under any circumstances, try to intimidate humans again. Apparently, when you showed them evidence of their capacity for violence, they didn't feel shame. They felt nostalgic. And that, Chancellor Vorthak realized with growing horror, was infinitely more terrifying than anything he'd been prepared for. The last thing he heard before Maya left was her humming what sounded suspiciously like a marching song.